The next morning, Mr. Harris arrived at his office as usual. His driver dropped him at the front of the tall glass building, and the guards greeted him with polite bows. He walked through the shining lobby, his polished shoes echoing against the marble floor. Everything was the same as always, but inside, something felt different. He kept thinking about the little girl, Lily, who had entered his office the day before. He thought of her innocent face, the way she had held her stuffed bear, and the simple words she had spoken. "Can you be my friend?" For most of his life, Harris had met people who wanted something from him, businessmen who wanted money, employees who wanted promotions, and strangers who wanted his influence. But Lily had wanted none of those things. She had wanted only friendship. The thought stayed with him, like a small flame refusing to die out. When he reached his office, he sat at his desk and looked around. His office was filled with expensive items, heavy curtains, rare paintings, polished furniture, and glowing screens showing numbers and reports. Yet somehow the room felt emptier than before. Yesterday, when Lily had stepped in, her laughter and her curious eyes had filled the place with warmth that money could never buy. He touched the corner of the desk where Lily had placed her stuffed bear, Mr. Buttons. For a moment he imagined the toy still sitting there, smiling at him with stitched eyes. He shook his head, almost amused at himself. The most powerful man in the building, distracted by a child's toy. Then, as if his thoughts had called her, he heard it again, the soft knock. 3 little taps. His heart skipped. He stood up quickly, almost too quickly for a man who was always calm and controlled. "Come in," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. The door opened, and there she was again. Lily. Her short hair was tied with a pink ribbon today, and she wore a small raincoat that was slightly too big for her. And of course she carried Mr. Buttons under her arm. "Hello?" she said brightly. Harris felt an unexpected smile pull at his lips. "Hello, Lily," he replied. "You came back?" "Of course," she answered, walking into the office as if she belonged there. "You didn't say no yesterday," he raised an eyebrow. "So if I didn't say no, that means yes?" She nodded with complete confidence. "Yes, that means you are my friend now." Harris chuckled softly. He was not used to such simple rules, but somehow they felt more honest than the complicated contracts and agreements he dealt with every day. Lily climbed into one of the chairs in front of his desk, her little legs swinging. She looked around the office with wide eyes. "Your office is very big," she said, "but it looks a little sad." "Sad?" Harris repeated, surprised. "Yes," she said seriously. "There are no colors, only brown and gray. You should put drawings on the wall." "Drawings?" He leaned back, amused. "What kind of drawings?" "Happy ones," she said, hugging Mr. Buttons. "Like flowers or rainbows, or maybe a big smiling sun. That will make this room less lonely." Harris felt a strange warmth spread in his chest. For years, no one had ever spoken to him like this. People always admired his office, calling it grand or impressive, but this small child had called it lonely. And deep inside, he knew she was right. "Maybe you could make a drawing for me," he suggested. "Would you do that?" Her face lit up. "Yes, I will draw something for you tomorrow. Mr. Buttons will help too." For the first time in a long time, Harris found himself looking forward to tomorrow. The hours passed quickly that day. Between meetings, Harris caught himself thinking about Lily's words. He imagined her drawing, colorful and simple, pinned on his gray walls. He imagined laughter filling the room again. Each thought felt like a crack in the heavy walls he had, built around his heart. Later in the afternoon, he asked his secretary quietly, "Do you know a child named Lily? She must belong to someone in the building." The secretary nodded. "Yes, sir. She is the daughter of Mrs. Evans, one of our janitors. Sometimes the little girl waits for her mother after school in the lobby." Harris was silent. "A janitor's daughter. That explained why she had wandered upstairs. But what amazed him was her courage. Most adults in the company were too nervous to even knock on his door. Yet this little girl had walked straight in and spoken to him without fear. That evening, as he left the office, he found himself scanning the lobby. And there she was, sitting on a chair with Mr. Buttons while her mother worked. She waved at him with a big smile. He lifted a hand and waved back, something he had not done for anyone in years. The guards and employees who saw it were shocked. The CEO, known for his distant and serious nature, was smiling and waving at a child. They whispered to each other, wondering what had changed. But Harris did not care what they thought. All he knew was that for the first time in a very long while, he did not feel completely alone. As he rode home in his car that night, the city lights passing by, he thought about Lily's question again. "Can you be my friend?" It was such a simple request, yet it was reshaping his heart. He realized that friendship was not something to be signed on paper, not something to be bought with wealth, and not something to be locked away. It was as natural and as necessary as breathing. And it had come knocking at his door in the form of a 4-year-old girl with a stuffed bear. That night, as Harris entered his empty apartment, the silence did not feel as heavy as before. He placed his suit jacket on the chair, sat by the window, and let himself smile. Tomorrow, he thought, Lily would bring him a drawing, and that thought alone made the world feel brighter. Mr. Harris sat behind his large wooden desk on the top floor of the tall glass building. The room was quiet except for the soft ticking of a clock and the faint sound of rain outside. He had everything that people usually dream about: a big office, a successful company, and more money than he could ever spend. Yet inside, he felt empty. Each day looked the same. He woke up early, wore his expensive suit, and arrived at the office before anyone else. He attended long meetings, signed papers, and made decisions that affected hundreds of people. Everyone respected him, but nobody really knew him. People saw him as serious, distant, and untouchable. They did not know that when the office lights went off at night and he returned to his silent apartment, loneliness followed him like a shadow. Harris was not always like this. Long ago, when he was a young man, he had dreams of building something great, but also dreams of love and friendship. Somewhere along the way, the pressure of business, the endless chase for success, and the fear of failure made him hard. He told himself he did not have time for emotions. He thought people around him only wanted something from him, never friendship, never genuine care. Slowly, he built tall, invisible walls around his heart. The rain outside grew heavier, tapping against the wide glass windows of his office. Harris leaned back in his chair and stared at the city below. Cars moved like tiny dots. People hurried on the sidewalks with umbrellas, and neon signs glowed in the wet streets. He wondered if anyone down there ever thought about him as a person, not as the CEO. For many, he was only a name on the building or a face in a magazine. That afternoon, something unusual happened. A soft knock came at his office door. It was a gentle sound, almost unsure, so light that at first he thought he had imagined it. Very few people ever came to his office without an appointment. Most waited until his secretary announced them. Curious, he waited, and the knock came again. 3 little taps. "Come in," Harris said, his voice calm but puzzled. The door opened slowly. To his surprise, it was not a secretary, not a manager, not even a nervous employee with papers in hand. It was a little girl, no older than 4, standing in the doorway. She had short, dark hair, big, curious eyes, and she clutched a small stuffed bear in her arms. Her shoes were wet from the rain, and her cheeks were slightly red from the cold. For a moment, Harris thought he was dreaming. Children did not belong in offices like his. Everything about his world was serious and orderly, while this small figure was full of innocence and warmth. The girl looked up at him and spoke in a small but clear voice. "Can you be my friend?" The question froze him in place. Harris had been asked many things in his life, to sign deals, to approve budgets, to give speeches, to make promises, but never this. No one had asked him to be a friend, not in many, many years. He blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. "What did you say?" he asked gently. She stepped inside, holding her bear tighter. "I said, can you be my friend?" Her voice carried no hesitation, only pure hope. Something inside Harris stirred. A part of him, buried under years of seriousness and distance, woke up. He studied her face. She was innocent, fearless, and completely honest. She did not know who he was or what kind of power he held. She did not care about his company, his money, or his reputation. All she wanted was something simple: a friend. Harris almost smiled, though he caught himself. "Why me?" he asked quietly. The girl shrugged in the simple way only a child could. "Because you look lonely," she said. Her words struck his heart like a gentle arrow. Lonely. It was the word he had avoided all these years, the truth he never admitted to anyone, not even to himself. Yet here it was, spoken by a child who had barely entered the world. He leaned forward on his desk, his voice softer now. "What's your name?" "Lily," she answered, her eyes bright. She stepped closer, placing her stuffed bear on the corner of his desk as if it belonged there. "Lily," Harris repeated, tasting the name like it was something precious. He glanced at the bear, then back at her. "And what about your friend here?" "This is Mr. Buttons," she said proudly. "He's my best friend, but he said I should find another friend too, so I came here." For the first time in years, Harris let out a small laugh. It felt strange and unfamiliar, yet warm. He had forgotten how laughter felt when it came from the heart. The rain continued to fall outside, but the office felt different now. The silence was broken, not by numbers or reports, but by a child's simple truth. Harris looked at Lily, then at the stuffed bear, and back at her again. He realized that this moment was unlike anything his money or success had ever given him. A 4-year-old had walked into his world and asked him for something he thought he no longer deserved. Friendship. In that quiet office, with rain tapping the glass and the city rushing below, something small yet powerful began. It was the first spark of change, though Harris did not yet know how deep it would go. He only knew one thing for certain. He did not want this child to walk out and never return. That day, with 3 little knocks and 1 simple question, the story of his life started to shift. The next morning, Mr. Harris arrived at his office earlier than usual. The sun had just begun to rise, painting the city sky with shades of pink and orange. He sat at his desk, but his mind was not on the numbers, the reports, or the endless list of meetings waiting for him. Instead, his thoughts were on a small girl with bright eyes, a pink ribbon, and a stuffed bear named Mr. Buttons. He wondered if Lily would really come back as she had promised. It had been years since anyone had promised him anything simple, anything pure. He almost doubted it, but then he remembered the confidence in her little voice when she had said, "I will draw something for you tomorrow." At exactly 10 o'clock, the soft knock came again. 3 gentle taps. "Come in," Harris said quickly, his voice carrying more eagerness than he expected. The door opened and Lily entered, holding a folded paper in her small hands. Mr. Buttons dangled from her arm as usual. She skipped across the large office and placed the paper on his desk with a proud smile. "I made this for you," she said. Harris unfolded the paper carefully. Inside was a colorful drawing done in crayons. There was a big yellow sun in the corner, a bright rainbow across the sky, and a tall building with shining windows. In front of the building stood 2 stick figures, one tall and one small. The tall figure wore a square suit and the small one held a bear. Above them, in shaky letters, Lily had written, "Best friends." For a long moment, Harris just stared at the picture. His chest tightened in a way he could not describe. The walls of his office, usually filled with silence and gray, seemed to glow with color just because of this simple piece of paper. "This is beautiful," he said at last, his voice softer than usual. "Thank you, Lily," she grinned. "Now your office is not sad anymore." Harris smiled faintly. "You are right. It already feels different." He looked at her drawing again. "Why did you put me in the picture?" "Because you are my friend," she said simply, as if it needed no more explanation. Those words touched him deeply. For years, people had called him many things: leader, boss, businessman, even genius. But no one had called him friend. That small word felt heavier than any award he had ever won. "Where should I put it?" he asked. "On the wall," she said without hesitation. "So everyone can see." He stood, walked to the side wall, and pinned the drawing there. It looked out of place among the serious paintings and polished wood, yet somehow it belonged more than anything else. Lily clapped her hands. "Now it looks happy." For the rest of the morning, Lily sat in his office. She hummed little songs, asked curious questions about his computer, and even tried spinning in the big chair when he let her. Harris found himself laughing, a sound that surprised even him. At noon, she asked, "Can we have lunch together?" Harris paused. He had a schedule full of meetings, important clients waiting, and a business lunch planned with top investors. Yet when he looked at Lily's hopeful eyes, all of that seemed less important. For once, he allowed himself to say something he rarely said. "Yes, let's have lunch together." They sat in the staff cafeteria instead of his private dining room. The workers and employees stared in surprise as the CEO sat at a small table, with a child, eating sandwiches and soup. Harris did not care about the whispers around him. For the first time in years, he enjoyed a meal without rushing, without pressure, simply because he was not eating alone. "Mr. Harris," Lily said between bites, "do you know how to draw?" He shook his head. "I haven't drawn in a very long time." "You should try," she said seriously. "Drawing makes people happy. Even Mr. Buttons tries sometimes." Harris chuckled. "Maybe you can teach me." "Okay," she said cheerfully. "Tomorrow we will draw together." That afternoon, as Harris walked her down to the lobby where her mother was waiting, Mrs. Evans looked nervous. She bowed politely and said, "I'm so sorry, sir. I hope Lily has not disturbed you." Harris shook his head. "Not at all. In fact, she has given me something no one else has in a long time." He pointed to the drawing she had made. "She made my office brighter." Mrs. Evans blinked in surprise. She had always known the CEO as a distant man, someone far above her world. To hear him speak with such warmth about her daughter felt like a miracle. That evening, back in his apartment, Harris did something unusual. Instead of opening files or checking reports, he sat with a notebook and a pencil. He tried to draw, though the lines were shaky and clumsy. He drew a sun, a rainbow, and 2 stick figures. When he looked at it, he laughed softly to himself. It was not perfect, but it felt alive. The next day, he would show it to Lily. He could already imagine her laughter and her bright smile. As he placed the notebook aside, Harris realized something important. All his life, he had been searching for meaning in big achievements, in success, in wealth. But in just 2 days, a child's simple request for friendship had given his life more meaning than all of that. And in his heart, he knew this was only the beginning. The next few days passed in a way Mr. Harris had never experienced before. His routine, once filled with endless meetings and silent evenings, now had a new rhythm. Every morning, after settling at his desk, He waited for the soft knock. 3. Little taps, always gentle, always on time. And every morning, Lily appeared with her stuffed bear, Mr. Buttons, and her bright smile. She brought drawings, songs, and endless questions. She asked why his desk was so big, why his computer had 2 screens, and why he never had toys in his office. Harris, who was used to serious questions about profits and projects, found himself answering questions he never thought about. Sometimes, he even laughed at her innocent thoughts. One morning, she sat across from him and announced, "I will teach you how to draw better." He raised an eyebrow. "Better than what?" "Better than your picture from yesterday," she said honestly. The rainbow was too small, and the sun was hiding. Harris laughed, holding up his hands in surrender. "You are the teacher, then. Show me." So Lily sat beside him with crayons spread out on the desk. Together they drew suns, flowers, and smiling faces. Harris's lines were still uneven, but Lily clapped anyway. "You're learning," she said proudly. Something inside Harris softened each time she smiled. He realized he was enjoying moments he never thought he would. Simple things, colors, laughter, and even silence shared with a child were making his heart lighter. The employees began to notice changes, too. The CEO, who once walked through the halls with a stern face, now sometimes smiled. The man who usually kept his office door shut now left it slightly open. Even his voice during meetings grew calmer, less sharp. "Sir," one of his managers whispered. To another, "Have you noticed? He seems different." "Different how?" "Less cold, almost kind." No one could explain the change, but everyone felt it. One afternoon, as Harris walked through the building, he passed by the break room. Normally, he never stopped there. But this time, he noticed 2 employees sitting silently, looking tired. He paused, then asked, "Are you both all right?" The employees looked shocked. Never before had the CEO asked about their feelings. They nodded quickly, but the warmth in his voice stayed with them long after he left. It was Lily's influence, though she didn't even realize it. Her friendship was spreading beyond his office, like ripples in water. Later that week, Lily made another request. "Can I bring my friends here one day?" she asked. "Your friends?" Harris repeated. "Yes," she said eagerly. "They don't believe me when I say my friend works in a giant office with shiny windows. I want them to see." Harris hesitated. He had spent years keeping his office private, a place of power and control. But now the thought of children running around with crayons and laughter did not bother him. In fact, it made him curious. "All right," he said after a moment. "You may bring them, but only if they behave." "They will," she promised. When the day came, 3 little children walked into his office with Lily. They carried crayons, paper, and tiny backpacks. They spread out on the floor, drawing rainbows and houses while giggling together. Harris sat at his desk, watching them with quiet amazement. For years, his office had been filled only with the sound of printers and keyboards. Now it was filled with laughter. The walls, once heavy with silence, seemed alive. Even the employees, who passed by the open door, peeked in and smiled. "Mr. Harris," Lily said suddenly, holding up a paper. "We drew you again." He leaned down to look. On the paper were stick figures, 4 small children, 1 tall man, and of course, Mr. Buttons. Above them, in colorful letters, were the words, "Friends Forever." Harris felt his throat tighten. Something about those simple words touched him deeply. For so long he had believed that friendship was not meant for him. Yet here it was, written in bright crayon by a child who believed in it without doubt. That evening, when he returned to his apartment, he found himself walking to his bookshelf. It was lined with awards, trophies, and certificates. Each one represented years of hard work and success. But as he looked at them, they felt strangely empty. He thought of the crayon drawings pinned to his office wall. They were not perfect, not polished, but they carried more meaning than all his trophies combined. For the first time, he asked himself, a question he had avoided for years. What is success really worth if you have no one to share it with? The next day, Harris surprised everyone again. He walked into the main lobby, where many employees gathered during the morning rush. Instead of heading straight to his elevator, he stopped to greet people. He asked one worker about his family. He complimented another on her hard work. The employees were stunned but grateful. "Did you see that?" one whispered. "The CEO spoke to me. He actually cared." Little by little, the man who was once seen as cold and distant was changing, and at the heart of it all was a 4-year-old girl with a stuffed bear. That evening, as Harris sat with Lily in his office, she asked a simple question. "Are you happier now?" He looked at her, surprised. "Why do you ask?" "Because you smile more," she said. "And Mr. Button says you laugh more too." Harris thought for a moment. Then he nodded. "Yes, Lily, I am happier." She grinned. "Good. Friends should always be happy together." As he watched her play with crayons on his desk, Harris realized that his life was no longer the same. The walls he had built around his heart were slowly falling. He was not just a CEO anymore. He was something greater. He was a friend. And, though he did not yet know it, this was only the beginning of a deeper change, one that would soon touch not only his life, but the lives of many others around him. For several weeks, Mr. Harris grew used to Lily's daily visits. Each morning, he listened for the soft knock, and each afternoon, he watched her leave with her mother. His office, once gray and silent, now carried the bright colors of crayon, drawings. His walls held rainbows, smiling suns, and stick figures labeled best friends. Even his employees noticed that their boss was different, warmer, kinder, and strangely more human. But then one morning, something unusual happened. The office was quiet. 10 o'clock passed, and there was no knock. Harris kept glancing at the door, waiting, listening, hoping. Yet the door remained closed. By noon, he grew restless. He told himself that Lily was just busy or perhaps at school. But when the next day came and still there was no knock, worry began to creep into his heart. For years, he had disciplined himself not to depend on anyone. Yet in only a short time, this little girl had become part of his world. Her absence left the office feeling emptier than before. On the third day, unable to ignore it, Harris went down to the lobby. He spotted Mrs. Evans, Lily's mother, cleaning near the entrance. Her movements were slow and her face looked tired. Lily was nowhere to be seen. "Mrs. Evans," Harris said gently. She startled at his voice, quickly standing straight. "Oh, Mr. Harris, I'm sorry. Is something wrong?" "Yes," he said, his tone calm but serious. "I haven't seen Lily in days. Is she all right?" Mrs. Evans hesitated. She lowered her eyes and gripped the cleaning cloth in her hands. "She's fine," she whispered. "Just staying home." But Harris was not convinced. "Please, Mrs. Evans, tell me the truth." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with worry and embarrassment. After a long pause, she said softly, "We're struggling, sir. My pay is small, and our apartment is not very warm. Lily caught a cold, and I couldn't afford to take her to the doctor. She needs rest." The words hit Harris harder than he expected. He, who lived in a penthouse with every comfort, had never once thought of the struggles of those who worked quietly in his building. The thought of Lily, bright, innocent Lily, lying sick in a cold room was almost unbearable. "Why, didn't you tell me?" Harris asked gently. Mrs. Evans looked down again. "I didn't want to trouble you. You are the CEO. People like us. We don't bring our problems to people like you." Her words stung. For so long, he had lived behind a wall of distance, and now he saw the damage it had caused. People believed he would never care. People believed he was too far above them to see their pain. That evening, Harris sat alone in his office. The colorful drawings on his wall seemed dim without their artist. He picked up one paper where Lily had drawn him with a bright smile. He touched the crayon lines gently, as if they could connect him to her. The loneliness returned, but now it felt different. Before Lily, he had accepted loneliness as part of his life. But now, after knowing friendship, it hurt more deeply. On the fourth day, Harris made a decision. He asked his driver to take him not home, but to the small neighborhood where Mrs. Evans lived. The streets were narrow, the buildings old, and the apartments crowded together. Children played outside, their laughter echoing through the alleys. Harris, dressed in his expensive suit, stood out sharply among them. He knocked on the door of a tiny apartment. After a moment, Mrs. Evans opened it, shocked to see him. "Mr. Harris, what are you doing here?" "I came to see Lily," he said, simply. She hesitated, but then stepped aside. "Please come in." The apartment was small, with thin walls and worn furniture. In the corner, under a blanket, Lily lay on a small bed. She looked pale, but her eyes lit up when she saw him. "You came," she whispered. Harris's chest tightened. He knelt beside her and smiled gently. "Of course I came, Lily. I missed my friend." She hugged Mr. Buttons closer and said, "I missed you too. The office must be sad without me." "Yes," Harris admitted softly. "It is very sad." He spoke with Mrs. Evans for a while, and the truth became clear. She worked hard every night, yet her pay barely covered rent and food. Medical bills were impossible. She had never asked for help because she feared being judged. Harris listened, in silence. Guilt weighed heavy on him. For years he had prided himself on building a strong company, yet he had ignored the lives of the people who kept it running. That night, as he returned to his apartment, he could not rest. He thought of Lily's innocent question, "Can you be my friend?" A friend was not someone who smiled only during happy times. A true friend cared when things were hard. The next morning, he made a quiet decision. He would not let Lily or her mother suffer in silence, not only because he cared about them, but because he realized that every person in his company mattered. Still, he knew this was just the beginning. Helping one child and her mother was not enough. Something greater had to change, inside him and inside the company. And with that thought, the CEO who once lived behind walls of distance prepared himself for a new path, one he had never walked before, a path of compassion. The next morning, the tall glass building stood under a bright sky. The rain of the past days was gone, replaced by sunlight that sparkled against the windows. Mr. Harris entered the lobby with a steady step, but inside, his mind was filled with thoughts of Lily and her mother. He had not slept much the night before. He kept seeing Lily's small face on the pillow, her weak smile as she clutched Mr. Buttons, and her brave words about the office being sad without her. He realized then that a true friend could not stand by quietly while someone he cared for suffered. Friendship meant action. When he reached his office, he sat at his desk, staring at the stack of papers before him. Contracts, reports, and numbers filled the pages, but none of them felt as important as the decision forming in his heart. 3. 10 o'clock, for the first time in many days, the knock returned. 3 soft taps. His face lit up. "Come in," he said quickly. The door opened, and Lily stepped inside. She still looked a little pale, but she was standing strong, her ribbon tied neatly in her hair. Mr. Buttons dangled from her arm as always. "You're back," Harris said warmly. "I told you I'd come when I felt better," she replied, climbing onto the chair across from him. "See? I'm strong again." He smiled, relief washing over him. "Yes, you are very strong. She tilted her head. "Did the office miss me?" "It did," Harris said. "I missed you too." Her face brightened at his words. She pulled a new drawing from her little bag and handed it to him. This time, it showed a big heart in the center with 3 figures inside: Lily, Mr. Buttons, and Harris. Above it, she had written in shaky letters, "Friends always help each other." Those words sank deep into him. They were more than a drawing. They were a lesson, spoken by a child, but heavy with truth. That afternoon, Harris called for a company meeting. The managers, supervisors, and staff gathered in the main hall, curious about the sudden announcement. Harris rarely spoke to everyone directly. When he did, it was usually about numbers, profits, or new business plans. But this time, his words were different. He stood on the stage, looking at the many faces before him. For the first time, he did not see them as workers or employees. He saw them as people, with families, struggles, and dreams, just like Lily and her mother. "I have been your leader for many years," Harris began. His voice was calm but strong. "I built this company with my mind, but somewhere along the way I forgot to use my heart. I was so focused on success that I did not see the lives of the people around me. That was a mistake I no longer want to make." The room was silent. Everyone listened closely. "Starting today," Harris continued, "we will create new programs for our employees and their families. Healthcare, education support, and better living conditions will no longer be dreams. They will be realities. This company will not only build profits, it will build people's lives." Gasps and whispers spread through the crowd. Many could not believe what they were hearing. Harris paused, then said something even more personal. "This decision was inspired by a little girl. A girl who reminded me that true friendship means helping one another. If a child can teach this to me, then surely we adults can learn it too." At the back of the hall, Lily sat on a chair beside her mother, swinging her legs happily. She waved at Harris and he smiled back. After the meeting, many employees felt hope like never before. For years, they had seen their CEO as a distant figure, high above their struggles. But now, he had shown them kindness. He had shown them he cared. The next few weeks brought real changes. Mrs. Evans, Lily's mother, was given a better position with fair pay and support. Families of workers received medical help, and small scholarships were offered for their children. The atmosphere in the building changed. People walked with lighter steps, with gratitude in their hearts. And at the center of it all, Harris felt a new sense of purpose. Each time he saw Lily's smile, he knew he had chosen the right path. One evening, after most employees had left, Lily sat in his office coloring another picture. Harris leaned back in his chair, watching her. "Lily," he said softly, "do you know what you've done?" She looked up, tilting her head. "What did I do?" "You changed me," he said with a small smile. "You reminded me how to be a friend. You helped me see what truly matters." She grinned. "That's what friends do. They make each other better." He nodded. "Yes, you made me better." For Harris, the miracle was not just in the programs or the company's new direction. The miracle was in how a 4-year-old girl had broken the walls around his heart with nothing but honesty, innocence, and love. That night, as he left the office, he walked past the lobby where employees gathered. Many greeted him warmly, something that had never happened before. Harris realized he was no longer seen as a cold figure at the top. He was seen as part of their lives, and it all began with 3 little knocks on his door. The city was alive with the sound of mourning. Cars moved along busy roads, shopkeepers opened their stores, and children hurried to school. In the middle of all this stood the tall glass building of Harris's company, but something about it had changed. It was no longer seen as only a place of business. People now spoke of it as a place where hope lived. Inside, the atmosphere was brighter than before. Employees smiled more often, greeted each other kindly, and carried less worry on their shoulders. Harris noticed this each day as he walked through the halls. It warmed his heart in ways numbers and profits never could. Every morning, Lily continued her little routine of knocking on his door. Sometimes she brought a drawing, sometimes a small story, and sometimes she just wanted to sit quietly in his office while coloring beside him. For Harris, those small moments became the best part of his day. One Friday morning, Lily knocked as usual. When Harris called her in, she stepped inside holding a folded paper carefully in her hands. Her ribbon shone brightly against her dark hair, and Mr. Buttons peeked from her bag. "I made something," she said shyly. "What is it this time?" Harris asked, smiling. She opened the paper to reveal a picture of a large building. Around it, she had drawn people holding hands, smiling. At the top, she wrote, "The Happy Office." Harris felt a lump in his throat. He looked at the drawing for a long moment before speaking. "It really is a happy office now. Thanks to you." Her small shoulders lifted proudly. "That means I'm a good friend." He reached across the desk and gently touched her hand. "The best friend I could have." Asked for. Later that day, Harris held another meeting, but this time it was not just for his employees. He invited their families, too. The main hall filled with laughter, chatter, and the sound of children running around. It was a new sight, one that would have been unthinkable in the past. Standing on the stage, Harris addressed everyone. "This company is no longer only about business. It is about all of us. Together. From today, every year we will host a family day. This building belongs not only to workers, but also to their loved ones. Because behind every person here is a family that gives them strength." The hall erupted in applause. Smiles spread everywhere. For many families, it was the first time they felt truly included, seen, and valued. At the back of the hall, Lily tugged at her mother's sleeve and whispered, "He's different now. He's happy." Her mother nodded with tears in her eyes. "Yes, dear. He's found his heart again." That evening, after the event ended, Harris walked Lily and her mother out to the car. The sun was setting, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. Lily looked up at the tall building one last time before getting into the car. "Promise me something," she said, turning back to Harris. "Anything," he replied. "Even when I grow big and go far away, you'll still be my friend. Okay?" His eyes softened. "I promise, Lily. No matter where you are, I'll always be your friend." She smiled wide and hugged him tightly. It was a hug filled with innocence, trust, and pure love. Harris bent down to return the embrace, knowing deep in his heart that this small child had given him the greatest gift of his life. Over the following months, Harris's changes reached even beyond the walls of his company. Other businesses in the city began to notice. Some leaders wondered why his employees were happier and more dedicated. Soon, people learned about the programs, the support, and the culture of kindness Harris had built. Slowly, other companies began to follow the same path. What started with one friendship began to spread like light in the darkness. One afternoon, while Harris sat in his office, Lily colored by his side as usual. She looked up suddenly and asked, "Do you think miracles are real?" He leaned back, thinking. "Yes, I do." "Why?" she pressed. "Because a miracle happened right here," he said softly. "A little girl knocked on a big door, and everything changed." Her eyes shone with curiosity. "You mean me?" "Yes," he said. "You are the miracle." Lily giggled, then went back to her drawing, humming a small tune. Harris watched her quietly, his heart full. He realized that in life, miracles did not always come with loud noise or shining lights. Sometimes they came as a soft knock on a door. Sometimes they came as a child asking for nothing more than a friend. From that day on, Harris carried Lily's words with him. No matter how busy he became, he never forgot to greet people kindly, to listen, and to care. He knew that power was not measured in wealth or authority, but in how one touched the lives of others. Years later, when Lily grew older and her visits became less frequent, Harris still kept her drawings pinned on his office wall. Whenever he felt lost or tired, he looked at them and found strength again. The story of the little girl and the CEO became known among the employees. They told it to new workers, reminding them that kindness and friendship had built the foundation of the company they were proud to be part of, and in every telling there was always one clear truth. The day Lily knocked on the CEO's door, asking to be his friend, was the day a miracle truly happened.